As the pianist played the piano, the millionaire was frozen when he heard the music. The same his beloved played before disappearing 25 years ago. Miles Harrington sat alone in his expansive office, staring out of the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bustling city of Seattle. From up here, the world seemed small, manageable, a view that perfectly suited the man who had built an empire from the ground up. To everyone around him, he was a figure of power and success. But those who knew him best, or at least once did, understood that behind the confident smile and sharp suits was a man haunted by a past that no amount of wealth could ever erase. It had been 25 years since Lillian disappeared. 25 long years since she'd walked off the stage after her final performance and vanished without a trace. The memory of that night was still as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. He could see her in his mind's eye, her dark hair cascading down her back, her fingers dancing across the piano keys with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. The music she played was like a private conversation between the two of them, a language only they understood. Lillian was his great love, the person who had made his world feel bright and full of promise. They had plans, big plans. They were going to get married, travel, maybe even start a family. But those dreams had been shattered when she disappeared, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a gaping hole in his heart. Miles had searched everywhere, hired private investigators, and even ventured to the darkest corners of the city, hoping for any sign of her. But as days turned into weeks and weeks turned into years, he was forced to accept the harsh reality that she was gone. He hadn't just lost Lillian. He'd lost the part of himself that believed in happy endings. He swore off concerts, vowing never to set foot in one again. What was the point? The music had lost its magic without her. Yet, despite everything, he never stopped wondering. What happened to Lillian? Why did she disappear? And most importantly, where did she go? It was a question that gnawed at him every single day, even as he buried himself in work, building Harrington Enterprises into the powerhouse it had become. Miles thought that maybe if he stayed busy enough, if he kept his mind occupied with contracts, deals, and mergers, he wouldn't have to think about that void. But late at night, when the city outside his penthouse was quiet and still, the memories would creep back in, pulling him into that familiar, aching sadness. Today, though, had been one of those rare days when the past felt almost bearable. He had kept busy with meetings, and the distraction had worked, for a while. That is, until his phone buzzed with a message from Andrew, his godson, inviting him to a concert. At first, Miles ignored it. He didn't do concerts anymore, and Andrew knew that. But a few minutes later, another message came in, this time with a simple, almost pleading tone. "You need to see this, Uncle Miles. Trust me." He'd stared at the message for a long time, debating. Andrew had always been persistent, and he was one of the few people who never pushed Miles to talk about Lillian, respecting the wall he'd built around that part of his life. Maybe that was why Miles hesitated. Andrew wouldn't insist without a good reason. Finally, he typed a response. "All right, when and where?" The concert was that evening, in a small, intimate venue not far from his office. Miles almost changed his mind a dozen times, but Andrew had a way of making his requests feel like obligations. So, after wrapping up his last meeting, he found himself walking into the dimly lit concert hall, scanning the room for his godson. Andrew waved him over, a broad grin on his face, clearly delighted that Miles had shown up. "Thank you for coming, Uncle Miles," Andrew said, his voice full of enthusiasm. "I promise you, you won't regret this." Miles forced a smile. "We'll see." As they took their seats, the lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. The stage was bathed in a soft, warm glow, and a single spotlight illuminated the grand piano at its center. Miles felt his chest tighten as a young woman with dark, wavy hair stepped onto the stage and took her place at the piano. For a moment, he was overwhelmed by a sense of déjà vu. She reminded him of Lillian, not in appearance, but in the way she moved, with a calm, assured grace. The girl introduced herself as Marlowe, a name that rang unfamiliar to him. She spoke briefly, thanking the audience for their support, and then began to play. The first few notes drifted softly into the room, and Miles felt a chill run down his spine. It was a gentle, melancholic melody, one that tugged at something deep inside him. Then, as the music swelled, recognition hit him like a freight train. It was their song, the piece Lillian had composed, just for him. A melody that only she knew, a melody that no one else could possibly have heard. Miles's heart raced, and he felt tears well up in his eyes. He wanted to stand up, shout, demand answers, but he was frozen in place, trapped between disbelief and a desperate, unflickering hope. As Marlowe played, lost in the music, Miles sat there, his mind reeling. How could she possibly know this song? What connection could this young pianist have to Lillian? For the first time in 25 years, he felt a spark of something he thought he'd lost forever. A need to uncover the truth. When the music finally stopped, the audience erupted in applause, but Miles didn't move. He stayed in his seat, staring at Marlowe as she took her bow. He knew, in that moment, that he had to talk to her. He had to find out who she was and how she knew that song. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a strange, unsettling sensation. Like the past wasn't as far behind him as he had once believed. The concert hall was buzzing with excitement as people mingled, sharing their thoughts on Marlowe's stunning performance. But Miles remained rooted to his seat, barely aware of the chatter around him. His mind was racing, desperately trying to make sense of what he had just experienced. It was impossible. Yet he had heard it, their song, a melody that had been a private exchange between him and Lillian. Something she had composed only for them. How could this young woman, this Marlowe, know it? Andrew nudged his arm, snapping Miles out of his daze. "Uncle Miles, wasn't she amazing? I told you it would be worth it," he said, his face still beaming with excitement. Miles turned to Andrew, his eyes wide and bewildered. How did she know that piece?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Andrew's smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean? Isn't it just a beautiful piece she played? I thought you'd like it, given your history with music." "It's more than that," Miles insisted, leaning in closer, his tone urgent. "That song, no one else should know it. Only Lillian knew that melody." Andrew's eyes widened, a mix of confusion and curiosity. "Wait, are you serious? Maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe she learned it somewhere else." Miles shook his head, still struggling to keep his composure. "No, you don't understand. That was a private piece, something Lillian composed herself. I need to speak with her, Andrew. Can you arrange that?" Andrew hesitated, glancing at his uncle's intense expression. "I can try," he said, unsure of where this sudden urgency was coming from. I'm not sure how these things work, but I can ask one of the event coordinators if she's available to meet fans." "No," Miles interrupted, a hint of frustration in his voice. "I need more than just a casual introduction. I need to know how she knows that song." He paused, trying to steady himself. "Please, Andrew." Sensing the gravity of the situation, Andrew nodded. "All right, I'll see what I can do. Just stay here, okay?" He got up and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Miles alone with his thoughts. Miles could hardly breathe as he waited, his mind flashing back to memories he had tried so hard to bury. Images of Lillian, laughing as she played the piano, her eyes sparkling as she teased him with melodies, flooded his thoughts. That song had been a part of their love, a secret shared only between them. It had been Lillian's way of saying "I love you" without words. And now, hearing it again, Miles felt a rush of emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. It wasn't long before Andrew returned, a triumphant look on his face. "Good news. I managed to speak with one of her assistants. She's willing to meet you briefly, but we have to be quick. She has another event to prepare for tomorrow." Miles felt a mix of relief and anxiety. He hadn't expected things to move so quickly, but he wasn't going to let the opportunity slip away. "Where is she?" he asked, already getting to his feet. "Follow me," Andrew said, leading the way through a side door that took them to a quieter part of the venue. They passed a few more corridors before arriving at a small room where Marlo was seated, speaking softly with a couple of people. She looked different offstage, more relaxed, yet still carrying an air of grace about her. As they approached, one of the assistants stepped forward. "Ms. Marlo, this is Mr. Miles Harrington. He was hoping to have a quick word with you." Marlo glanced up, her expression polite but slightly guarded. "Of course," she said, offering a warm, professional smile. "It's always a pleasure to meet people who enjoy my music." Miles hesitated, unsure of how to begin. He hadn't planned for this moment. He didn't have the words ready, but he couldn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm sorry if this seems abrupt," he started, his voice a little shaky, "but I need to ask, that last piece you played, where did you learn it?" The smile on Marlo's face wavered. She seemed taken aback by the question, as if it wasn't something she'd been expecting. "The last piece?" she repeated, trying to gauge his intent. "It's a piece my mother taught me when I was young. It's one of the first things she ever played for me." Miles's heart skipped a beat. "Your mother," he whispered, the word catching in his throat. Who was your mother?" Marlo looked puzzled. Her name was Lillian Chambers. She hesitated, as if gauging his reaction. "She was a pianist, but she passed away a long time ago." The room seemed to tilt slightly as Miles tried to process what he was hearing. He gripped the back of a nearby chair to steady himself, his mind reeling. "Lillian Chambers," he repeated, hardly believing the words that had come out of his mouth. She was my fiancée. She disappeared 25 years ago, and I never knew what happened to her." Marlo's expression shifted from polite curiosity to shock. "Wait, what?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're saying you knew my mother?" Miles nodded, his eyes wide and misty. "Yes, we were going to get married, but one night she disappeared, and I never saw her again." For a moment, there was only silence as Marlo tried to make sense of what she was hearing. It was as if she had been hit by a tidal wave of emotions, and she struggled to stay afloat. I don't understand," she stammered. "She never mentioned anything about that. She always told me she was alone." Miles felt a pang of sadness, imagining what Lillian must have gone through, wherever she was, without him. "I need to know everything, Marlo, everything she told you, how she lived, where she was, what happened to her." Marlo took a deep breath, trying to process the whirlwind of information that had just been thrown at her. "I don't know a lot," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I was very young when she passed away. She always seemed sad, like she was carrying a burden, but she never told me why. All I know is that she taught me that song, and it was special to her." Miles swallowed hard, trying to push back the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Please, Marlo," he said, his voice gentle but urgent. "If you know anything, if there's any way you can help me understand what happened to her, I need to know. She was everything to me." Marlo looked into his eyes, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of the same pain she had often seen in her mother's gaze. It was raw, unspoken, but unmistakable. "All right," she said softly. "I'll tell you what I know. But I'm not sure if it will be enough." Miles managed a faint, hopeful smile. "It's a start." And with that, a fragile but vital connection was formed, bridging a 25-year gap of pain, mystery, and unanswered questions. For the first time, Miles felt like he was closer to finding out the truth, and perhaps closer to Lillian than he had ever been before. The drive back to his penthouse that night was a blur. Miles couldn't stop replaying the conversation with Marlo in his head. He had gone to the concert expecting nothing more than a brief distraction, maybe even just to placate Andrew. But instead, he had stumbled upon a revelation that shook the foundations of everything he thought he knew about his past. Lillian had been alive, and she had a daughter who had grown up without him, learning the very song that was meant to be a secret between him and her mother. He barely slept that night, and when he did, his dreams were haunted by fragmented memories of Lillian, her laughter, the way she'd brush a strand of hair behind her ear when she played, and the sound of that melody echoing softly in the background. Each time he woke up, the reality would crash down on him all over again. Lillian had been alive long enough to raise a child, and he never knew. But why? Why had she disappeared, and what had kept her away? The next morning, Miles found himself at his desk, staring at a photograph of Lillian he kept hidden in a drawer, away from the rest of the world. She was smiling, her eyes bright with life, as if she had no idea what lay ahead. He hadn't looked at the photo in years, but now it felt like a lifeline. He was desperate for answers, and Marlowe was his only lead. He picked up his phone, dialed Andrew's number, and waited as the line rang. "Uncle Miles?" Andrew's voice was a mix of surprise and concern. "Everything okay? I didn't expect to hear from you so soon." "I need to see her again," Miles said, cutting straight to the point. "Marlowe, I need to talk to her. There's more I need to understand, and she's the only one who can help me." Andrew hesitated. "I'm sure we can arrange something, but you realize she's not exactly available at a moment's notice, right? She's got a busy schedule." "I don't care," Miles replied, his voice firm. "I'll make time. I'll arrange whatever is necessary. I need to know what happened to Lillian, and if Marlowe can help me, then I need to speak with her." There was a pause on the other end, as if Andrew was trying to gauge just how serious his uncle was. "All right," he finally said. "I'll see what I can do. But you need to be prepared, Uncle Miles. This might not give you the closure you're looking for." "Just do it," Miles said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Please." After ending the call, he sat back in his chair, feeling the familiar weight of anxiety settle over him. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. There was a chance that this entire pursuit would only open old wounds, but he had to try. For 25 years, he had lived with unanswered questions, and now, for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope that he might finally get the answers he so desperately needed. The following evening, Miles found himself walking into a small cafe, one that Andrew had arranged for the meeting. It was quiet, intimate, an ideal setting for the conversation they were about to have. Marlowe was already there, seated at a corner table, her fingers lightly drumming on the surface as she waited. She looked up as he approached, her expression a mixture of curiosity and guardedness. "Mr. Harrington," she said, nodding politely as he sat down across from her. "I wasn't expecting to see you again so soon." "Please, call me Miles," he replied, trying to sound calm, even though his heart was pounding in his chest. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I realize this might be a bit overwhelming." Marlowe gave a small, tight-lipped smile. "It is, but I'm curious too. You said you were close to my mother, that you were engaged. I want to know more about that." Miles took a deep breath, trying to collect his thoughts. "We met when we were both young. She was a pianist, talented, passionate. We fell in love, and we were going to get married. But one night, after a concert, she disappeared. I searched for her for years, but it was like she vanished into thin air. I never found out what happened to her, and I never stopped wondering." Marlowe's expression softened, and for the first time, Miles saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes. She never talked about her past. Not really. All I knew was that she was alone, and she always seemed to be hiding something. I guess now I understand why. "Do you know where she was during those years?" Miles asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did she ever tell you anything about why she left? Or where she went?" Marlowe shook her head slowly. "No, she never talked about it. I remember asking her once when I was little, but she just said it was a long story and that it was better if I didn't know." She paused, then added, but she always looked so sad when she said it. Miles's heart ached at the thought. He could picture it. Lillian, trying to protect her daughter from whatever pain she had endured, even if it meant keeping secrets. Did she keep anything? Letters, photographs, anything that might help us understand. Marlo thought for a moment, then nodded. There was a box. She kept it in her room, and she always told me not to touch it. After she passed, I looked inside, but there wasn't much. Just a few old photographs and a letter I couldn't make sense of. It was odd. Can I see it? Miles asked, his tone almost pleading. I know this is a lot to ask, but if there's any chance it could help me understand what happened, I need to see it. Marlo hesitated, her eyes searching his, as if trying to decide whether she could trust him. Finally, she nodded. All right, I'll bring it to you, but I'm not promising it will give you the answers you're looking for. My mother, she was complicated. I loved her, but I never really understood her. Miles nodded, grateful for even this small concession. Thank you, he said softly. I don't know what I'll find, but it means a lot that you're willing to share this with me. As they finished their conversation, Miles felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Whatever was in that box could change everything, or it could lead to more questions, more confusion. But one thing was clear. He was closer now to understanding the truth than he had been in over 2 decades. And he wasn't going to stop until he knew why Lillian had disappeared and what had really happened to her. As they parted ways, Marlo glanced back at him, her expression thoughtful. I don't know why my mother kept this hidden, but I hope you find what you're looking for, Miles, she said quietly. Miles watched as she walked away, feeling a glimmer of hope and a flicker of fear. He was diving back into a past that had once broken him, but this time, he wasn't alone. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for closure and for peace. Miles spent the next few days in a state of restless anticipation, checking his phone every few minutes, hoping for a message from Marlo. He had given her his number at the cafe, and she had promised to let him know when she found the box with her mother's belongings. But now, as he waited, he found himself wrestling with a mix of emotions he hadn't felt in years: hope, fear, and an aching sadness that he thought he had managed to bury deep within. He didn't tell anyone about what was happening, not even Andrew. It was too delicate, too raw. He was afraid that if he spoke about it, it might all disappear, like waking from a dream. Instead, he threw himself into work, attending meetings and reviewing contracts. But even the usual comfort of routine didn't offer much solace. All he could think about was Lillian and the mystery that had haunted him for a quarter of a century. Then, late one evening, as he was finishing up in his office, his phone buzzed with a new message. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Marlo's name on the screen. I found the box. Can you meet tomorrow? Miles immediately replied, yes. Name the time and place. They agreed to meet at a small cafe near Marlo's apartment. It was a quiet spot, out of the way, where they could talk without interruption. The next day, Miles arrived early, unable to contain his anxiety. He ordered a coffee, but barely touched it, his eyes fixed on the entrance, waiting for her to walk through the door. When Marlo arrived, she was carrying a small, weathered box, about the size of a shoebox, under her arm. She looked different today, less like a performer and more like a young woman who had just uncovered a part of her past she didn't quite understand. As she approached the table, Miles stood up to greet her, offering a tentative smile. I hope this is okay, Marlo said, setting the box down gently on the table. I wasn't sure if I should even bring it, but I guess I want to understand too. Miles nodded, his eyes fixed on the box. Thank you. I can't tell you how much this means to me. Marlo sat down and took a deep breath, as if steeling herself. Before you open it, I need to say something, she began, her voice calm but firm. I don't know what you're expecting to find, but... My mom, she was always very private. She never talked about her past, and I never pushed her. So whatever is in there, it might not give you the answers you're looking for. I understand, Miles said softly. But even if it doesn't, I need to try. For my own peace of mind. She nodded, and with a slight hesitation, pushed the box towards him. Miles's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the lid, revealing its contents. Inside, he found a few old photographs, a delicate silver locket, and a bundle of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. There was also a small, handwritten note on top, addressed to Marlowe. He picked up one of the photographs and felt his breath catch in his throat. It was Lillian, younger and smiling, sitting at a piano. The image was grainy and faded, but there was no mistaking her. Seeing her face after all these years felt like a punch to the gut. It brought back a flood of memories, good and bad, that he hadn't allowed himself to think about in so long. Marlowe watched him closely, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "That was taken before I was born," she said softly. "I don't know who took it, but it was always in the box." Miles carefully set the photograph aside and picked up the locket, opening it to reveal a tiny, faded picture of himself on one side and a small lock of hair on the other. He felt a wave of emotion wash over him, and for a moment, he had to close his eyes to keep from tearing up. "She must have kept this all those years," he murmured, more to himself than to Marlowe. "Even when she..." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Marlowe waited patiently, giving him space to process. "There's a note," she said, pointing to the top of the stack of letters. "It was addressed to me, but I never really understood it. Maybe it'll make more sense to you." Miles hesitated, then carefully picked up the note and unfolded it. The handwriting was delicate, familiar, and his heart skipped a beat as he read the first few lines. "My dearest Marlowe, if you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. I wish I could have told you everything, but there were things that I needed to keep hidden, to protect you. There are secrets from my past that I never wanted to burden you with. But if you find yourself needing answers, I hope you can forgive me for not being able to give them to you while I was alive. There is someone who might help you understand. Someone I once loved dearly. His name is Miles Harrington." The words blurred as tears filled Miles's eyes. Lillian had written his name. She had thought of him, even after all those years, even when she was far away and alone. He looked up at Marlowe, his voice barely steady. She wanted you to find me." Marlowe's eyes softened, and she reached out, hesitantly placing a hand on his. "I guess she did," she said quietly. "But I still don't understand why she left, or why she never came back." Miles wiped his eyes, taking a deep breath. "I don't know either, but we're going to find out. Whatever happened, whatever kept her away, we'll get to the bottom of it." They spent the next few hours going through the contents of the box. The letters were mostly mundane, notes about daily life, thoughts about Marlowe's childhood, and occasional mentions of dreams Lillian had for her daughter. But there were hints, little fragments of information that suggested Lillian had been afraid of something, or someone. There was one letter, in particular, that caught Miles's attention. "Sometimes, I wish I could go back and change things," it read. "But I know there are choices I made that can't be undone. I hope one day you'll understand why I had to do what I did, why I had to keep you safe. Please, Marlowe, if you ever have the chance, find Miles. He will help you understand." Miles set the letter down, his mind spinning. Lillian had known something, and whatever it was, it had been enough to drive her away from him, from their future together. But it was clear she hadn't wanted it that way. She had been forced to make a choice, and now he was determined to find out who or what had driven her to that decision. Marlowe looked at him, a mix of hope and fear in her eyes. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. "We keep digging," Miles said, his voice resolute. "We follow every lead, every clue. Whatever happened to your mother, we're going to find out. And if there's someone responsible for all this, they're going to have to answer for it." For the first time since he had seen Marlowe on that stage, Miles felt a sense of purpose. The past might have been full of pain and unanswered questions, but now, with Marlowe by his side, he was ready to face it head-on. Together, they would uncover the truth, no matter how deep they had to dig or how painful the answers might be. In the days that followed, Miles and Marlowe began their investigation in earnest. They agreed to meet regularly, often at the same small cafe where Marlowe had first brought the box, and each meeting was filled with more questions than answers. Miles had connections, resources, and a determination that he hadn't felt in years. But there were still so many gaps in the story, so many pieces of the puzzle missing. One evening, as they sat at their usual corner table, Marlowe placed a stack of letters on the table between them. "I've been going through everything again," she said, her voice thoughtful. "There's something that keeps coming up, an address, mentioned a few times. I think it might be where she was staying after she left." Miles's eyes lit up. "An address." He picked up one of the letters and scanned through it, his mind racing. If we can find out where she was, maybe we can find someone who remembers her, who might know more about why she disappeared. Marlowe nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "It's not much, but it's the best lead we have right now. The address is in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of Seattle. I thought maybe we could go there together." For a moment, Miles hesitated. He hadn't been back to that part of the city in years, not since Lillian had vanished, but the look on Marlowe's face was enough to push his doubts aside. "Yes," he said, his voice firm. "Let's go." The next day, they drove out to the address, the city gradually giving way to quieter streets lined with modest, aging houses. It was a stark contrast to the bustling downtown where Miles spent most of his time, and he found himself struck by the quiet, almost melancholy feel of the neighborhood. It was the kind of place where people kept to themselves, where life moved at a slower, more deliberate pace. When they arrived, they found themselves standing in front of a small, nondescript house with peeling paint and a garden that had clearly been neglected for some time. It didn't look like much, but for some reason, Miles felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if he had been there before, even though he knew he hadn't. Marlowe glanced at him, then back at the house. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is where the letters said she was staying." Miles took a deep breath and walked up to the front door, knocking gently. They waited, but there was no answer. After a moment, he knocked again, harder this time, but still, no one came to the door. He glanced back at Marlowe, who looked equally disappointed. "Maybe no one's home," she said, though she didn't sound convinced. They were about to turn away when an elderly woman appeared at the end of the walkway, pushing a small cart filled with groceries. She paused when she saw them, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice wary. Miles stepped forward, trying to sound as non-threatening as possible. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am," he said. "We're looking for someone who used to live here. Her name was Lillian Chambers. We were wondering if you knew her." The woman's expression softened slightly at the mention of the name, and she nodded. "Lillian? Yes, I remember her," she said, her voice quieter now. "She was a sweet girl. Quiet, kept to herself. It's been a long time, though. I'm not sure how I can help." Marlowe stepped forward, her heart pounding. "We're trying to find out more about her," she explained. "She was my mother, but she never talked much about her past. We were hoping that maybe you knew something, anything that could help us understand why she disappeared." The woman's eyes flicked between Miles and Marlowe, as if trying to piece together their connection. "Your mother?" she said, clearly surprised. "Well, I had no idea she had a daughter." Marlowe nodded, her throat tightening. "She did. and we're trying to find out why she left, why she kept everything a secret." For a moment, the woman was silent, lost in thought. Then she sighed, setting down her cart. "I don't know much, but I do remember that she wasn't alone when she first moved here. She had a friend, a man who visited her often. They seemed close." Miles's heart skipped a beat. "A man?" he repeated, his voice barely steady. "Do you remember what he looked like?" The woman hesitated, as if unsure how much she should reveal. "Tall, dark hair, always well-dressed. He drove a fancy car, which stood out around here. I thought they were together, but it was clear that there was something off. Sometimes they argued, but they kept it quiet. Lillian was always so kind, but she seemed scared of him, I think." Marlowe's mind was spinning. "Do you remember his name?" The woman shook her head. "No, I'm sorry. She never mentioned his name to me, and he didn't come around much after the first few months." She glanced at the house, then back at them. "If you're really trying to find out what happened to her, you might want to ask the landlord. He's lived here forever, and he might remember more than I do. His name's Mr. Sanders, and he runs a little store down the street." Miles felt a surge of hope. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "You've been more help than you know." The woman gave them a small smile, then continued on her way, leaving Miles and Marlowe standing on the sidewalk, trying to process what they had just heard. "Who do you think he was?" Marlowe asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The man she was with." "I don't know," Miles replied, though he had a sinking feeling in his gut. But if she was scared of him, then he might have had something to do with why she disappeared. "We need to find this Mr. Sanders and see what he knows." They found the store easily enough, a small, cluttered shop tucked between a laundromat and a cafe. An old bell above the door jingled as they walked in, and they were greeted by the sight of shelves crammed with everything from canned goods to gardening tools. Behind the counter stood an older man, his glasses perched precariously on the edge of his nose as he flipped through a newspaper. "Good afternoon," he said without looking up. "Can I help you find something?" Miles stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Are you Mr. Sanders?" he asked. The man looked up, blinking in surprise. "Yes, I am. What can I do for you?" "We're trying to find out more about a woman who used to live in one of your properties," Miles explained. "Her name was Lillian Chambers." Mr. Sanders's expression changed, a flicker of recognition passing across his face. "Lillian, huh? Haven't heard that name in a long time," he said slowly. "What's your interest in her?" "She was my mother," Marlowe said, stepping forward. "And she was supposed to marry him," she added, nodding towards Miles. "We're trying to find out what happened to her." The old man studied them for a moment, then nodded. "I remember Lillian. Sweet girl, but troubled. She had a lot going on, and not all of it was good." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "There were some shady characters around her, but there was one man in particular who stood out." Miles felt his heart sink. "Do you know who he was?" Mr. Sanders hesitated, then finally said, "I never got his full name, but he went by Thomas." The name hit Miles like a punch to the gut. Thomas, his brother. The one person he never would have suspected to be involved. Miles felt the world tilt beneath him, a realization dawning that changed everything. For all these years, he had been searching for answers. And now, he was faced with a truth he wasn't sure he could handle. Miles stumbled back a step, as if he'd been physically struck. He could barely process what Mr. Sanders had just said. Thomas, his brother. The name rang in his ears, echoing like a terrible refrain. It didn't make sense, it couldn't make sense. But there it was, hanging in the air, undeniable and chilling. Marlowe noticed the sudden change in Miles's demeanor and gently touched his arm. "Miles, are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. She didn't understand why the name seemed to have such a profound effect on him, but she could tell it was something serious. Miles took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Thomas," he repeated, almost in a whisper. "That's my brother's name." Marlowe's eyes widened in shock. "Your brother?" She took a step back, her mind racing to connect the dots. "Are you saying—" "I don't know what I'm saying," Miles interrupted, shaking his head as if trying to clear it. "It can't be him. Thomas. He wouldn't." But even as he said the words, doubt crept into his mind. He had always seen Thomas as the charming, dependable younger brother, the one who could smooth over any situation with a smile and a well-timed joke. But that charm had often masked something colder, a sharp edge that Miles had chosen to ignore over the years. Could it be possible that Thomas had been hiding something much darker all along? Mr. Sanders watched their exchange, his brow furrowed. "I take it this is news to you," he said slowly. "I'm sorry if I've brought up something painful, but if you're looking for the truth, you need to know all the pieces." Miles turned back to the older man, his expression a mixture of desperation and determination. "You're sure it was Thomas?" he asked, his voice low. "There's no chance you're mistaken." "I'm sure," Mr. Sanders said, nodding firmly. "He was here more than once. He didn't exactly make friends with the neighbors, but he made it clear that he was involved in Lillian's life. I remember wondering why she put up with him, but it wasn't my business to ask." "What do you mean by involved?" Marlowe asked, her tone cautious. "Did he ever threaten her? Did he say or do anything that might explain why she disappeared?" Mr. Sanders hesitated, glancing around the store as if to make sure no one else was listening. "I didn't see anything firsthand, but there were rumors. People said he was trying to control her, keeping her isolated. There was talk of money, too, and not the kind of money you keep in a savings account. I don't know how much of it was true, but it was clear that Lillian wasn't happy." Miles's mind was spinning, trying to piece everything together. The idea that his own brother might have been manipulating Lillian, controlling her, was almost too much to bear. But if it was true, it explained so much. The suddenness of her disappearance, the lack of any real clues, the way all of his efforts to find her had come up empty. If Thomas had been behind it, he would have known exactly how to cover his tracks. Marlowe, sensing the turmoil in Miles, stepped in. "Mr. Sanders, do you remember when this was happening? Around what time?" "It was a while ago, but I'd say 25 years, give or take. Right around when she vanished," he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "I remember because it was the talk of the neighborhood for a while, and then one day, she was just gone." Miles clenched his fists, a fresh wave of anger surging through him. Why didn't anyone say anything? Why didn't someone call the police or try to help her? The old man gave him a sad, knowing look. People like to mind their own business. Besides, Lillian never asked for help. And Thomas, he was persuasive. He had a way of making sure people didn't ask too many questions. Marlowe glanced at Miles, her expression grave. "It sounds like he was trying to keep her under control," she said softly. "Maybe he didn't want her to contact you, or maybe there was something else going on." Miles didn't respond right away. His mind was racing, filled with 1,000 questions and no clear answers. He needed to confront Thomas, to get to the bottom of this once and for all. But at the same time, he feared what he might discover. If Thomas really had been responsible for Lillian's disappearance, then it meant that every effort he had made to find her, every sleepless night spent wondering, had been for nothing, because the person he should have been looking at was right in front of him all along. "Thank you, Mr. Sanders," Miles said finally, his voice tight. "You've given us more information than we had before. We appreciate your help." The old man nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said. "Lillian was a kind soul. She didn't deserve whatever happened to her." As they left the store, Marlowe glanced at Miles, trying to read his expression. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly. "Are you going to talk to him?" "I have to," Miles replied, his jaw clenched. "If there's even a chance that Thomas was involved, I need to know. I can't let this go." They drove back to the city in silence, the weight of the new information pressing down on them. Miles's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He remembered all the times Thomas had been there for him, the late-night phone calls, the shared business ventures, the sense of camaraderie that only brothers could have. But now, all of that felt tainted, twisted by the possibility that it had all been a lie. Later that evening, Miles found himself standing in front of his brother's sleek, modern apartment building, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't called ahead. He didn't want to give Thomas any time to prepare. He needed to see the truth on his face, to confront him without warning. He took the elevator up to Thomas's floor, feeling the tension coil tighter with each passing second. When the door slid open, he walked down the familiar hallway, stopping in front of a door he had visited countless times. For a moment, he hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorbell, but then he steeled himself, reaching out and pressing the button. A few moments later, the door opened, and there stood Thomas, looking surprised but pleased to see him. "Miles, what a surprise," he said, flashing that easy, charming smile that had always come so naturally to him. "What brings you here?" Miles didn't waste any time. "We need to talk," he said, his voice sharp. "About Lillian." For a split second, he thought he saw something flicker in Thomas's eyes, something like fear, or maybe guilt. But then it was gone, replaced by a look of confusion. "Lillian, Miles, that was years ago. Why are you bringing this up now?" "Because I found out some things," Miles said, his tone icy. "Things that don't add up, and I need to hear the truth from you. No more lies." Thomas's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered, stepping aside and gesturing for Miles to come in. "All right, let's talk," he said, his voice smooth. "But I think you're mistaken, brother. I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I can assure you, it's not what you're imagining." Miles stepped inside, his gaze locked on Thomas. "I hope you're right," he said, his voice low, "because if you're not—" He let the sentence hang in the air, unfinished, but the implication was clear. This was no longer just about finding answers. It was about facing the possibility of betrayal and the painful realization that the person he had been searching for had been hidden by someone he thought he could trust. And as he prepared to confront Thomas, Miles knew that whatever happened next, there was no turning back. The atmosphere inside Thomas's apartment was tense, almost suffocating. Miles could feel the weight of the unspoken accusations hanging between them, a heavy, invisible fog that seemed to thicken with each passing second. Thomas motioned for Miles to sit, but he remained standing, his eyes fixed on his brother, studying every flicker of emotion that crossed his face. Thomas sighed, his smile wavering. "All right, Miles, let's get this over with. What exactly have you heard, and who's been filling your head with these ideas?" Miles didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out one of Lillian's letters, the one that Marlowe had shown him, the one that hinted at fear, at secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. He unfolded the worn paper and held it up. "Lillian wrote this," he said, his voice steady. "She mentioned a man who was controlling her, a man she was scared of. And today, I learned that man might have been you." Thomas's face was unreadable, but there was a slight tightening around his eyes, a flicker of something that passed too quickly for Miles to fully catch. "You've been talking to the wrong people," Thomas said calmly, leaning back against the arm of his sofa. "I don't know who's trying to turn you against me, but I can assure you, they're lying." "Stop it, Thomas," Miles snapped, his voice louder than he intended. "I'm not here to play games. I want the truth. You knew Lillian was alive after she disappeared, didn't you? You were in contact with her. What were you doing and why?" For a moment, Thomas seemed to struggle for words, his expression hardening. Then, he let out a slow, measured breath. "All right, Miles. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I was in contact with Lillian after she left, but it wasn't what you think. I was trying to help her." Miles blinked, caught off guard by the sudden admission. "Help her," he repeated, incredulous. "By keeping her away from me? By making sure no one could find her?" Thomas stood up, his posture defensive. "You have no idea what was going on," he said, his voice rising. "You think she just disappeared because she wanted to? No, she was in trouble. Miles. Serious trouble. And she begged me not to tell you." Miles's heart pounded in his chest. He felt like he was on the edge of some terrible revelation, something he both desperately wanted and feared to hear. "What kind of trouble?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Thomas hesitated, as if weighing how much to say. "Lillian was being blackmailed," he said finally, "by some people she got involved with, people who had leverage over her. She thought they were going to hurt you, Miles, and she was terrified, so she ran. She thought it was the only way to keep you safe." The words hit Miles like a punch to the gut. Blackmail, threats. He tried to imagine Lillian, scared and alone, forced to make a decision that tore her away from everything she loved. "Why didn't she come to me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why didn't she tell me what was happening?" "Because she didn't think you could protect her," Thomas said bluntly. "She thought if you knew, you'd try to fight them, and you'd end up getting hurt. She was trying to protect you, Miles, even if it meant sacrificing everything." Miles felt a pang of pain and anger. "And you? What were you doing in all of this? Just watching from the sidelines?" "I was trying to keep her safe," Thomas shot back, his own frustration boiling over. "I made sure those people stayed away from her. I helped her find a place to stay, gave her money, and tried to keep her hidden. I did everything I could, but she wasn't happy. She was scared, and she never stopped thinking about you." Miles felt the room spinning, his mind struggling to make sense of it all. "You should have told me," he said, his voice shaking. "I could have helped her. We could have figured it out together." Thomas's eyes darkened. "You're not listening, Miles. She didn't want your help. She thought the only way to save you was to disappear, and she made me promise not to tell you where she was. She thought it was the only way to keep you safe." Miles clenched his fists, a mix of rage and heartbreak flooding through him. "Then why did she never come back? If you were protecting her, why didn't she ever come home?" Thomas hesitated, and for the first time, his composure seemed to crack. "Because she couldn't," he said quietly. "She had an accident. She lost her memory. Miles. She didn't even know who she was anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and awful. Miles felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. "An accident?" he repeated, his voice hollow. "You're telling me she was out there, alive, and she didn't even remember?" "She had a few good years after she left," Thomas continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But then she had a car accident. She was in a coma for weeks, and when she woke up, she didn't remember anything. Not you, not her music, not even her own name. She lived the rest of her life as someone else, in a small town, with no memory of the woman she used to be." Miles felt sick, his vision blurring as tears welled up in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "You should have told me the moment you found out. I could have helped her, brought her home." Thomas looked down, his face drawn and weary. "What good would it have done, Miles? She didn't remember you. She didn't remember anything. I thought maybe it was better this way, that you could move on, have a life, but you never did you?" The room was silent, the only sound the faint hum of the city outside. Miles's mind was reeling, struggling to process everything he had just learned. He thought about all the years he had spent searching, all the sleepless nights wondering where she was, and all the while, she had been out there, lost to him in more ways than he could have ever imagined. "I loved her, Thomas," he said finally, his voice choked with emotion. "I would have done anything for her. And you took that away from me." Thomas's expression softened, and for a moment, he looked genuinely remorseful. "I was trying to do what I thought was right," he said. "Maybe I made the wrong choice, but I swear I was trying to protect you. I didn't want you to get hurt." Miles shook his head, wiping a tear from his cheek. "You didn't protect me. You robbed me of the chance to be there for her, to help her. You let me live a lie, thinking she was just gone, when she was out there, lost and alone." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the past hung heavy between them, a chasm that felt impossible to bridge. Finally, Thomas stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "I'm sorry, Miles," he said quietly. "I know it's too late, but I'm sorry. If I could do it all over again, I'd tell you the truth, but I can't change the past." Miles looked at his brother, the man who had been his closest friend and now felt like a stranger. "No," he said softly. "You can't change the past, but I can still find out what really happened to her. And if there's anyone left out there who's responsible for what happened, I'm going to make sure they answer for it." Thomas's eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't expected such resolve. "Miles, listen." "No, Thomas," Miles interrupted, his voice firm. "I'm done listening to you. From now on, I'm going to find my own answers. And if I find out you've been hiding more than you're telling me now, I swear, I won't forgive you." For the first time, Thomas looked genuinely afraid. "Miles, please." But Miles didn't want to hear it. He turned and walked out of the apartment, his mind reeling with everything he had learned. There were still so many unanswered questions, so many things that didn't make sense. But one thing was clear. The search for the truth was far from over, and now he had more reason than ever to keep digging, no matter what it cost. Miles drove through the city in a daze, his thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and pain. The revelation about Thomas had been like a knife to the heart, cutting through years of uncertainty and bringing with it a wave of anger and betrayal. He couldn't believe that his own brother had been involved, that he had known all along and had chosen to keep it hidden. Every word Thomas had said echoed in his mind, each one bringing new questions, and none of them had easy answers. He pulled over into a quiet parking lot, needing a moment to catch his breath. His hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady himself. He thought of Lillian, her smile, her laugh, the way her fingers would dance across the piano keys, creating music that felt like a conversation only they could understand. To think that she had been out there, lost and alone, was almost too much to bear. And the idea that she might have been scared, manipulated, and ultimately abandoned by those who should have helped her, it filled him with a rage he hadn't felt in years. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Marlo. "Did you find out anything?" Miles hesitated before typing his reply. "Yes, we need to talk." They arranged to meet at Marlo's apartment later that evening. By the time he arrived, the sky had darkened, and the city was bathed in the soft, golden glow of streetlights. Marlo was waiting for him at the door, her expression tense and anxious. She ushered him inside, and they sat down on the small couch, the room feeling almost claustrophobic with the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You look different." Miles took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I confronted Thomas," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. He admitted that he was in contact with Lillian after she disappeared. He claimed he was trying to protect her. Marlo's eyes widened. Protect her? From what? From people who were blackmailing her, Miles explained. He said she was scared, that she thought they were going to hurt me. So she ran, and he helped her stay hidden. Marlo's expression softened, but there was still a flicker of confusion. But if he was trying to help, why didn't he tell you? Why keep it a secret? Miles shook his head, his frustration boiling over. He said she didn't want me to know, that she thought I'd try to fight them, and it would put me in danger. He claims he was honoring her wishes, but... He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. I don't know if I can believe him. Not after everything. For a moment, Marlo was silent, digesting everything he had said. Do you think he's telling the truth? She asked finally. I don't know, Miles admitted, but I can't just take his word for it. There's more to this, I can feel it, and I'm not stopping until I know the whole truth. Marlo nodded, her expression resolute. Then we keep going. There has to be something we're missing, some clue that can lead us to the answers. She got up and walked over to a small desk in the corner of the room, pulling open a drawer and taking out a faded "Our Old" envelope. I didn't know if I should show this to you, she said, handing it to Miles. But after what you told me, I think it's important. Miles took the envelope and carefully slid out the letter inside. The handwriting was elegant and familiar, but the tone was different, urgent, almost frantic. Thomas, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of running, of hiding. I know you think this is for the best, but I can't live like this. I want to see Miles. I want to tell him everything, even if it means putting myself at risk. Please, just let me do this my way. I'm begging you. Lillian. Miles's heart twisted as he read the words. It was clear that Lillian had been desperate, trapped between fear and a longing to return to the life she had been forced to abandon. She wanted to come back, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She was trying to reach out, and he stopped her. Marlo sat down beside him, her eyes glistening with tears. It sounds like she felt trapped, she said quietly, like she didn't have a choice. Miles felt a fresh wave of anger surge through him. He kept her away from me. Even when she wanted to come back, he didn't let her. And now he's acting like he was doing her a favor. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white. I should have known. I should have seen through him. Marlo gently placed her hand on his, her touch warm and comforting. This isn't your fault, Miles, she said softly. You couldn't have known, but now that we do, we can do something about it. We can find out what really happened. They spent the next few hours poring over the letters, looking for anything that might give them a clearer picture of what had happened. Most of them were vague, filled with hints of fear, but never enough to piece together a complete story. It was as if Lillian had been trying to communicate without saying too much, afraid that even her letters might be intercepted. Then, near the bottom of the stack, they found a letter that stood out. Unlike the others, this one was addressed not to Thomas or Marlo, but to a name neither of them recognized: Carter Blake. Who's Carter Blake? Marlo asked, frowning as she scanned the letter. She mentions him a few times, but I've never heard of him. Miles's pulse quickened. I don't know, he said. But if she was writing to him, it means he was someone important. Maybe someone who knew what was going on. The letter was brief, but it was clear that Lillian had been asking Carter for help. Carter, I need you to make sure Thomas doesn't find out about this. I'm planning something, and I can't afford any mistakes. If anything happens to me, you'll know why. Miles and Marlo exchanged a look. If this Carter Blake is still around, he might be able to tell us more, Marlo said, her voice filled with a newfound sense of purpose. We have to find him. Miles nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. Yes, he could be the key to all of this. He took out his phone and began searching for the name, hoping to find something, anything, that could lead them to this mysterious man. But there were too many results, too many possibilities, and none of them seemed to match. Marlo's expression darkened with frustration. There has to be a way to narrow it down, she said. If he was connected to Thomas, maybe he was involved with your family business. Do you have any contacts who could check for you? Miles thought for a moment, then nodded. I do. I have a friend who handles a lot of background checks for the company. If Carter was connected to any of our dealings, he'll be able to find out. They decided to call it a night, but as they prepared to leave, Miles turned to Marlo, his expression serious. "Are you okay with all of this?" he asked gently. "I know this isn't easy, digging up all these old wounds." Marlo managed a small, sad smile. "I need to know, Miles. I need to understand why my mother made the choices she did, why she was so scared. Even if it's painful, I want to know the truth." Miles nodded, feeling a deep sense of respect for the young woman who had become his unexpected ally. "We'll find it," he promised. "No matter how long it takes, or how difficult it gets, we'll find out what happened to her, and we'll make sure that the people who did this to her are held accountable." As they left the apartment, Miles couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something big, something that would finally give them the answers they'd been searching for. But he also knew that the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous it would become, and if Thomas had been willing to lie for so long, there was no telling what lengths he might go to in order to keep the rest of his secrets buried. The next morning, Miles was already on edge. After the previous night's discoveries, he knew he needed to act quickly. There were still too many unanswered questions, and now they had a new name to follow: Carter Blake. If Lillian had been reaching out to this man, then he could be the key to unlocking the truth about what had happened all those years ago. Miles reached out to his friend, Greg, who handled background checks and sensitive information for Harrington Enterprises. "Greg, I need a favor," he said over the phone, his voice steady but urgent. "I'm looking for someone named Carter Blake. I don't have much to go on, but I need to know if he has any ties to our family business or to my brother, Thomas." Greg didn't ask for details, which Miles appreciated. "I'll see what I can find, Miles," he said. "Give me a few hours." As he waited for Greg to get back to him, Miles couldn't sit still. He paced around his office, his mind replaying everything he had learned. The idea that Thomas had been involved in Lillian's disappearance and had possibly orchestrated the entire situation was a reality he was still struggling to accept. But the more he thought about it, the more the pieces began to fit. Thomas's charm, his ability to manipulate people, his need to control situations, it all made sense, and it made Miles sick to his stomach. Around midday, Greg called back. "I found something," he said. Carter Blake was a private investigator. Looks like he did some freelance work for various clients over the years. But there's one job that stands out. About 25 years ago, he was hired by a woman named Lillian Chambers to look into a series of anonymous threats. She paid him a considerable sum to find out who was behind them. Miles's pulse quickened. "Did he find anything?" "That's where it gets complicated," Greg continued. "There's no official report, but I dug a little deeper and found a series of encrypted emails exchanged between Blake and Thomas Harrington. It seems like they were negotiating something. I don't have all the details, but it looks like Blake was trying to get more money from Thomas to keep quiet about whatever he had discovered." Miles felt a chill run down his spine. So Thomas was paying off Blake. "Looks that way," Greg confirmed. "If Blake had information that could have exposed Thomas's involvement, it would make sense that he'd try to keep him quiet. But I did manage to find a current address for Blake. He's still in Seattle." Miles's heart pounded as he took down the address. "Thank you, Greg. I owe you one." He hung up the phone and immediately dialed Marlo, his hands shaking slightly. "I found him," he said as soon as she picked up. "Carter Blake. I'm going to see him today." "I'm coming with you," Marlo said without hesitation. Miles hesitated, knowing that things were becoming more dangerous. "Marlo, I don't know what we're walking into. This could be—" "I'm coming," she repeated, her voice firm. "This is about my mother, too. I have to be there." Miles couldn't argue with that. "All right, I'll pick you up in an hour." When they arrived at Blake's address, it was a rundown office building on the edge of the city, the kind of place that had seen better days. The windows were grimy, and the paint was peeling. But Miles felt a strange sense of anticipation as they walked up the narrow staircase to the second floor. They found the door marked C. Blake, Investigations, and knocked. A gruff voice called out from inside, "It's open." They stepped into a dimly lit office, where a man in his late 50s sat behind a cluttered desk. He was tall, with graying hair and a rough, weathered look that suggested he had seen his fair share of trouble. He glanced up, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of them. "Can I help you?" Miles didn't waste time. "My name is Miles Harrington, and this is Marlo Chambers. We're here to ask you about Lillian Chambers and the work you did for her 25 years ago." Blake's expression changed slightly, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Lillian," he muttered, almost to himself. "I figured it was only a matter of time before someone came looking for answers." He leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "But I'm guessing you're not here just out of curiosity. What do you want to know?" Miles stepped forward, his gaze unflinching. "We know that you were hired by Lillian to investigate threats she was receiving. We also know you had dealings with my brother, Thomas. We want to know what happened." Blake let out a low, humorless laugh. "Thomas Harrington. Now there's a name I haven't heard in a while." He reached for a cigarette, lighting it with a flick of his lighter. "You're opening up a can of worms, you know that. But all right, I'll tell you what I know. I'm not protecting him anymore." He took a drag of his cigarette, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "Lillian came to me because she was scared. She was getting anonymous threats, someone trying to blackmail her. She thought it was about money at first, but it became clear it was more than that. She was convinced whoever was behind it was connected to your family, so she hired me to find out." Miles's jaw tightened. "And what did you find?" Blake glanced at Marlo, then back at Miles, his eyes cold. "I found out your brother was behind it all. He was trying to make her disappear, convince her to leave you. He wanted her out of your life, and he was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen." Marlo gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "But why?" "Because he saw her as a threat," Blake said simply. "She was digging into some of his business deals, things that didn't exactly hold up under scrutiny. She was planning to tell you, and he couldn't let that happen. So he started pressuring her, making threats, and when that didn't work, he decided to play dirty." Miles felt a sickening sense of realization. The threats, they were from him. Blake nodded. "I confronted him about it, told him I knew what he was doing. That's when he paid me off to keep quiet. He didn't care what it cost. He just wanted her gone. I was supposed to be the one to scare her off, but she was tougher than he expected. She kept pushing, kept digging, and then..." He paused, flicking ash into a tray. "Then she had that accident. I don't know if he had anything to do with it, but it was damn convenient timing." Miles felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "You mean her car accident? The one that caused her to lose her memory?" Blake nodded, his expression grim. "After that, she was gone. No one heard from her again, and your brother made sure it stayed that way. He kept paying me to keep my mouth shut, to make sure no one ever connected the dots. But now, it looks like those secrets are catching up with him." Marlo's eyes were filled with tears, and she turned to Miles, her voice trembling. "He did this. Thomas did this to her." Miles's hands shook with rage. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Why didn't you say anything?" he demanded, his voice tight with fury. "You could have helped her. You could have stopped this." Blake's expression darkened. "I'm not proud of it," he said quietly. "But I was in deep, and Thomas made it clear what would happen if I crossed him. He had power, money, and I was trying to survive, but that doesn't make it right." Miles felt like he was drowning in a sea of anger and betrayal. All this time, he had been searching for answers, and the truth had been right there, hidden by the person he had trusted most. "Thank you for telling us," he said, his voice cold. "But if you knew all this, you owe it to Lillian and to Marlo to help us bring him down." Blake took a long drag on his cigarette, considering. "All right," he said finally. "I'll help you. But you need to be careful. Thomas isn't going to roll over and admit to this. He's going to fight. and he's going to play dirty. You better be ready for that." Miles nodded, his eyes burning with determination. "I'm ready. I don't care what it takes. He's not getting away with this." As they left Blake's office, Marlo took Miles's hand, squeezing it tightly. "We'll get justice for her," she said softly. "We'll make sure everyone knows the truth." Miles looked at her, seeing the strength and resilience that had carried her through so much. "Yes," he said, "we will, and this time, no one is going to stop us." As Miles and Marlo left Blake's office, they felt a sense of grim determination settling over them. The truth had finally been laid bare, but with it came a choice that Miles had been dreading. What was he supposed to do now? For years, he had envisioned finding out what had happened to Lillian, imagining some faceless villain responsible for her disappearance. But now he knew that villain had a face he recognized all too well, his own brother's. The drive back to the city was silent. Miles was lost in thought, and Marlo seemed to sense that he needed the space. She kept glancing at him, her face lined with concern, but she didn't say anything. Finally, as they reached the city limits, she spoke. "What are you going to do, Miles?" she asked softly, her voice almost tentative, as if she were afraid of the answer. Miles tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to confront him, make him pay for everything he's done. But he's your brother," Marlo finished for him, "and you don't know if you can do that." Miles nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I can't just let this go. What he did to Lillian, to you, it's unforgivable. But part of me doesn't want to believe it. Part of me still wants to think there's some explanation, something that will make this all make sense." Marlo reached out and placed her hand on his arm, a gentle, reassuring touch. "Sometimes, the truth doesn't make sense," she said quietly. "Sometimes, people do terrible things and there's no good reason for it. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't face the consequences." Miles glanced at her, seeing the pain and strength in her eyes. She had lost so much because of Thomas's actions, but she hadn't let it break her. "You're right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He needs to face what he's done, and I need to be the one to make sure that happens." They drove straight to Thomas's office, a sleek, modern building that stood in stark contrast to the dark secrets Miles now associated with it. As they entered the lobby, the receptionist looked up, surprised to see them. But Miles didn't stop. He marched straight to the elevator, Marlo close behind him, and punched the button for Thomas's floor. The ride up felt like an eternity. Miles's mind was racing, his emotions a chaotic mess of anger, betrayal, and sadness. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped out into the hallway, barely noticing the polished marble floors and minimalist decor. All he could see was the door to Thomas's office, and the man behind it who had betrayed him in the worst way possible. Without knocking, he pushed open the door and walked in. Thomas was sitting at his desk, talking on the phone. But he froze when he saw Miles and Marlo. He quickly ended the call, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Miles, what's going on?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Why are you here?" "We need to talk," Miles said, his voice cold and unwavering. "About Lillian." Thomas's expression didn't change, but Miles could see the flicker of anxiety in his eyes. "I already told you everything I know," he said. "I don't understand why you keep bringing this up." "Stop lying, Thomas," Miles snapped. "I know what you did. I talked to Carter Blake. He told me everything." The color drained from Thomas's face, and for a moment, he looked almost scared. But then he quickly composed himself, forcing a smile. "I don't know what Blake told you, but he's lying. He's always been a liar." "Don't," Miles said, stepping closer, his eyes burning with fury. "Don't try to twist this. I know you were behind the threats. I know you manipulated her, and I know you kept me from finding her after she lost her memory. You lied to me, to everyone, and now it's over. Thomas's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold defiance. "Fine," he said quietly. "Yes, I did it. I did what I had to do. Lillian was a problem, Miles. She was going to ruin everything we built, everything our family worked for. I couldn't let her do that." Miles felt a wave of nausea. "Ruin everything," he repeated, incredulous. "She loved me. She just wanted to be with me, and you—" He had to stop, unable to find the words to express the sheer depth of his disgust. "You destroyed her life. You destroyed my life." Thomas stood up, his eyes flashing with anger. "I protected you," he said, his voice rising. "I kept you from getting dragged down into her mess. She was involved with people who would have torn you apart. I did what I had to do to keep you safe." "No," Miles said, shaking his head. "You did it for yourself, to control everything, to make sure no one could threaten your little empire. You used me, used my love for her as a weapon against her, and then you made sure I'd never find out the truth. That's not protection, that's cruelty." There was a long, heavy silence. Thomas's face was flushed, his chest rising and falling with each angry breath. "And what are you going to do now, Miles?" he asked, his tone mocking. "Turn me in? Destroy our family's reputation? Go ahead. But know this, once you do, there's no going back. You'll lose everything." Miles felt his resolve waver. But then he glanced at Marlo, standing quietly by the door, watching the exchange with tear-filled eyes. She had lost her mother because of Thomas's actions. She had grown up without knowing the truth, without ever understanding why her life had been ripped apart. And she deserved justice. "I'm not losing anything," Miles said, his voice steady. "I've already lost everything that mattered to me, and it was because of you. But I'm not letting you get away with this." Thomas's eyes flashed with something like desperation. "You're making a mistake, Miles. This will destroy us." "No," Miles replied, his expression resolute. "It will destroy you. And maybe that's the only way I can start to make things right." Before Thomas could respond, Marlo stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "You took my mother from me," she said, her eyes fixed on Thomas. "She died without knowing who she was, without being able to find her way back. You can't undo that, but you're going to pay for what you did." For a moment, Thomas just stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Then he laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think this is about justice? You think you can just march in here and make everything better by punishing me? You're so naive. The world doesn't work that way." "No," Marlo said, stepping closer, her voice unwavering. "But at least we're not afraid to try." The tension in the room was electric, and Miles could see the fear in Thomas's eyes, the realization that he had finally lost control. "I've already called my lawyer," Miles said. "There will be an investigation, and I'm going to make sure everything comes out, every lie, every threat, every bribe. You're finished, Thomas." Thomas's expression twisted into a sneer. "You think this will make you happy? You think this will bring her back?" "No," Miles said softly. "Nothing can bring her back. But it will give her the justice she never got. And maybe, just maybe, it will help me find some peace." For a moment, Thomas seemed ready to argue, to fight back. But then he seemed to deflate, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "You always were too sentimental," he muttered. "I thought I was protecting you, but I guess I was just protecting myself." Miles looked at him, seeing not the brother he had once admired, but a stranger who had caused so much pain. "Goodbye, Thomas," he said, his voice final. "I hope, someday, you understand what you did." As he turned to leave, Marlo followed him, her hand slipping into his. They walked out of the office, leaving Thomas behind, and as the elevator doors closed, Miles felt a strange sense of relief, a weight lifting off his shoulders. It wasn't over yet. There would be legal battles, public scrutiny, and painful memories to confront, but the hardest part was done. Marlo squeezed his hand gently. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "And whatever happens next, we'll face it together." Miles looked at her, grateful for her strength and support. "Thank you," he said, "for being here, for helping me find the truth. I couldn't have done it without you." They stepped out into the cool evening air, and for the first time in years, Miles felt like he could breathe again. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least now he knew he was heading in the right direction, and no matter what lay ahead, he was ready to face it, knowing that he was no longer alone. The days following Thomas's confession were a whirlwind of activity. Miles had expected resistance, but the speed with which everything began to unravel was almost dizzying. Once the investigation was initiated, it didn't take long for the truth to come to light. The media caught wind of the scandal, and soon, the Harrington name was plastered across every newspaper and TV screen. But this time, Miles wasn't concerned about the fallout. He was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. As the investigation deepened, more details emerged. Thomas had been involved in shady business deals, using Harrington Enterprises as a front for illicit activities that Lillian had stumbled upon. When she threatened to expose him, he had resorted to blackmail, manipulation, and, ultimately, coercion to keep her silent. The anonymous threats, the orchestrated disappearance, and the cover-up, it was all part of a twisted plan to preserve his power and control. But now, with Miles and Marlo determined to uncover every last secret, Thomas's empire of lies was crumbling. On the day of Thomas's arrest, Miles stood outside the courthouse, watching as his brother was led away in handcuffs. There was a throng of reporters, their cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward as they shouted questions, but Miles barely heard them. He was focused on Thomas, watching as the man who had caused so much pain was finally held accountable. Thomas turned to look at him one last time, his expression a mix of anger, sadness, and something that might have been regret. But Miles didn't flinch. He had made his choice, and he knew it was the right one. As the police car drove away, he felt a strange sense of closure, as if a chapter of his life had finally been finished, even if it hadn't ended the way he once hoped it would. Afterward, Miles and Marlo found a quiet spot in a park nearby, away from the chaos of the media circus. They sat on a bench, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. For a while, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence was comforting, a shared moment of peace after so much turmoil. "Are you okay?" Marlo asked finally, breaking the silence. Miles nodded, though he still felt the sting of everything that had transpired. "I think so," he said. "It's strange. I thought I'd feel more relieved, but there's still this emptiness, like I lost something I can never get back." Marlo looked down at her hands, fiddling with the bracelet around her wrist. "I know what you mean," she said softly. "I spent so many years wondering who my mother was, why she disappeared. Now that I have the answers, I almost wish I didn't. It doesn't make the pain go away." Miles turned to her, his expression gentle. "I'm sorry, Marlo," he said. "For everything. For what my family did to you, to your mother. I wish I could change it." Marlo shook her head, offering a sad smile. "You don't need to apologize, Miles. You're not responsible for what Thomas did. You helped me find the truth, and that's more than I ever expected. I'm grateful for that." They sat in silence for a while longer, watching as children played nearby, their laughter carrying on the breeze. It was a reminder of how simple and beautiful life could be, even in the face of so much darkness. Miles felt a pang of longing, wishing he could have had moments like this with Lillian, moments where they could just sit and enjoy the world around them without the weight of secrets and lies hanging over them. "I've been thinking," Miles said, breaking the silence, "about what to do next. I don't want to keep running Harrington Enterprises the way it's been. Too much of it was built on lies, on things I didn't even know were happening. I want to make things right." Marlo looked at him, curious. What do you mean? I'm going to step down, Miles said. At least for a while. I need to figure out who I am without all of this. And I want to start a foundation, in Lillian's name. Something that helps people who've been hurt, who've been silenced. It's not much, but it's a way to honor her, to make sure her story doesn't just end in tragedy. Marlowe's eyes softened, and she reached out, taking his hand. That sounds like a beautiful way to remember her, she said. She would have wanted that. Miles felt a warmth spread through him at her words. I hope so, he said quietly. I spent so long trying to find her, trying to hold on to something that was already gone. Maybe it's time I let go and started building something new. Marlowe nodded, understanding. I think that's what she would have wanted for you too, she said. And you're not alone, Miles. Whatever comes next, I'll be here. They sat there as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It felt like the end of a long journey, but also the beginning of something new, something that could finally bring peace and healing. Over the next few weeks, as the dust began to settle, Miles focused on making good on his promise. He announced his temporary departure from Harrington Enterprises, appointing a trusted colleague to take over while he took some much-needed time away. The foundation was established quickly, with Marlowe helping him every step of the way. They named it the Lillian Fund, dedicated to supporting survivors of abuse, harassment, and coercion, giving them the resources and support they needed to rebuild their lives. The media initially treated the announcement with skepticism, speculating that it was just a PR move to salvage the family's tarnished reputation. But as stories of the foundation's impact began to emerge, it became clear that this was something genuine, something born out of love and a desire to make amends. And slowly, people began to see Miles not just as the man caught up in a scandal, but as someone who was trying to right the wrongs of his past. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, Miles and Marlowe found themselves back at the same cafe where they had first begun their journey. They sat by the window, sipping their drinks, and for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of calm between them. Do you think it's enough? Miles asked, staring down at his cup. Do you think I've done enough to make up for everything? Marlowe looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. I don't think it's about making up for the past, she said. The past it's there, and we can't change it. But we can choose what we do next. And you've chosen to do something good, something that will help people. That's what matters. Miles smiled, a genuine, warm smile that he hadn't felt in years. Thank you, he said, for believing in this, for believing in me. I don't think I could have done it without you. Marlowe blushed slightly, but she smiled back. I think we needed each other, she said simply. Maybe that's why this happened the way it did, so we could find a way to move forward together. As they left the cafe, walking through the quiet streets, Miles felt lighter than he had in a long time. There were still scars, still parts of him that ached when he thought of Lillian and all the things they never got to share. But there was also hope, a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in years. They reached a small park, the same one they had visited on the day of Thomas's arrest, and Miles stopped, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the sky. You know, he said, his voice thoughtful. I used to think that if I ever found out what happened to Lillian, it would bring me peace. But now I realize it wasn't about finding answers. It was about finding a way to live with the ones I already had. Marlowe nodded, standing beside him. And you've done that, Miles. You found a way to turn something painful into something beautiful. That's not easy. Miles reached out and took her hand, feeling a warmth and connection that gave him strength. I couldn't have done it alone, he said. Thank you, Marlowe, for everything. She squeezed his hand, smiling. You're welcome. As they stood there, side by side, Miles felt a sense of peace settle over him. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, He wasn't afraid of it. He knew there would be challenges, but he also knew he didn't have to face them alone. And with that, he was ready to begin again.